Thank you, Scott. Very interesting. Lovely to see you all here. Lovely to see some new faces and some ones that are very familiar. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about human resilience and link that to markets, but also to us as a species. That's enough of that. Okay. So, I wanted to share this slide with you. Many of you have seen it, and some of you have also seen a handout of a whole group of slides which gives more detail of each of these downturns. But in the last 100 years, we've seen 17 sort of quite significant downturns. This big one there, my late mother remembers that, and in actual fact, probably some of her attitudes towards money and thrift influenced her son, and that's probably why he's staying here. That's why he's standing here right now. But this, my mum remembers men coming to, knocking on the door and say, could we chop some wood in exchange for a meal? It was tough times, right? But there have been many tough times. And every time us humans seem to respond, we get together and we make some progress. Our community here has had some tough times, haven't we, over the last few years? We had the GFC. That didn't impact on us so much here in New Zealand, but we had the earthquakes, all right? And then we had the mosque massacre. But it was quite interesting, interesting to observe how the community pulled together. And that's quite significant because us humans are very capable of that. Maybe we're being trained that way, you know, like, it's with us. So there's lots of these downturns. Whenever they happen, the media is also starting to promote this is the end of the world. But after every downturn, there's a recovery. During the downturns, we can justify it. One part of our brain can say, oh yes, but we'll get through this before. But the other part of our brain will say, oh yeah, but it's different this time. And it is different this time. Every downturn has a different reason, and every downturn has a different response. I'm just going to pick a couple that we will talk about briefly. So, World War II, right? That was a long period of time. I can't imagine what it was like for communities where sons and some daughters were overseas for a long period of time, and you were never sure if they had survived the day. So you can see here, this is a graph of the US market, a measure of the 500 largest companies, and you can see quite a significant downturn over about 2.5 years or so. But even way before World War II had finished, markets started to look forward into a time that the war would finish, right? And markets had this recovery. Now, during this very tough time, what happens? It's during these really tough times that focuses our minds. Now, I don't know if any of you know what it's like to get about 3 ducks in a row when you're a cricketer, but that really focuses your mind. We're going to hear more about that from Pete a bit later. These tough times, they wake us up, all right? And if it doesn't kill you, it makes you better. Okay, so during wars, we've often seen huge innovation from the military because there's been a necessity to. Military's been responsible for helicopters, jet aircraft, the radar, antibiotics, digital photography, microwave ovens, the internet, of course. There was another, Scott referred to it before, the global financial crisis. All right, quite a downturn here over an 18-month period, all right? But then a strong recovery. What was the cause of this downturn? Problems in the banking sector. Companies driving for profit at the expense of other things, all right? Out of some downturns always comes some good. So recently, perhaps we have seen a major US bank who had a high-pressure sales culture. They kept on increasing targets that weren't really achievable, and many of their salespeople, their tellers, opened unauthorised accounts. Ultimately, they got found out, and they got found out very quickly. They were fined $3 billion. Of course, the CEO had to resign. The remarkable thing is that it only took 13 months from them being found out to them being fined, because so often previously the world allowed things to drift on. Here in New Zealand, one of our very good companies, as a result of poor compliance, we now see in the world increased expectations with regards to governance and compliance. It certainly puts costs up, but this is probably a good thing for all stakeholders. Fisher & Paykel in 2017 issued a code of conduct which puts things in place around corporate responsibility and sustainability. So a major change. Maybe some of our corporates are going back to a much improved culture, and that is probably a very good outcome from the GFC. We're going to hear more of this, and indeed at Cambridge Partners we are exploring already into what's called B corporations. So maybe in the past corporates have focused on return to shareholders or profit, but the world cannot just rely on governments and not-for-profits to improve the well-being of our communities. B Corps are thinking much further about all stakeholders, including clients, staff, the community, the environment, and shareholders. A much more balanced approach. B Corps will work towards reduced inequality, lower levels of poverty, healthier environments, stronger communities, and creation of high quality jobs. All right. So as people involved in business, we're very aware of these things. A trend, I think it's much more powerful than a trend. Right. So people using business as a force for good. Of course, we have to talk about another downturn, COVID. There's a very rapid slide here over a couple of weeks. When it all happened, actually, I was in Cape Town, which was an interesting place to be at that time. But we got back fine, thankfully. So as a result of COVID, there's been some innovations as well. Let's look at a couple. So here's Jim and Todd, a snapshot of here's us having a team meeting during COVID lockdown. Just out of interest, who here had heard of Zoom this time last year? Who here had used it this time last year? Oh, me. I think a couple of younger ones over there certainly had. But, Zoom was launched in 2013. It's been around a little while. In December of last year, there were about 10 million users per day. By April, over 300 million. All right. So these tough times, they wake us up, all right? And us humans adapt very quickly. Zoom has been beneficial, not just for families to communicate together, but it's been very helpful in the medical fraternity. And what we've seen as a result of sort of COVID, this is another great example of collaboration. Humans getting together, sharing information to solve a problem that is good for us all. So we've heard some exciting news this morning, didn't we, about another drug or pharmaceutical company developing a vaccine. Now that's quite extraordinary because vaccines typically have taken in the past about 15 years to develop. Right? And here we are, so not much more than 6 or 7 months. Now watch this space. We'll know a little bit more by Christmas and we'll know a little bit more by March, but here's hoping. All right? So it's interesting to reflect on how us lot as a species recover. Why are we so different? Well, people who study these sorts of things say, why we're different than other species? How come we're the only species that have put one of our own kind on the moon? No other species has been able to do that, all right? But we've got some attributes. We can learn from each other. Other species don't do that. We can work together. interestingly enough, humans are the only species that blush. So we must be a bit worried about what others think of us. All right? We adapt. And I suppose innately we're good. There's always some bad things, but let's focus on some positive things. What's evolution done for us that makes us like this? Well, first of all, you know, when you exercise a lot, you get that feeling pretty good, doesn't it? You know, that's some chemicals floating around our systems, endorphins. Maybe we evolved that we could keep chasing antelopes and we could run them down ultimately because we had these endorphins just keeping on pushing us along. Dopamine. You know, do any of you here have a to-do list, you know, and you write down checklists and you know, when you cross them off, you feel good when, you know, that's a little bit of an injection of dopamine. Or you mow the lawns, you know, you get them nice and straight, don't you? Don't let the kids do it, they don't do it as well as Dad, you know. So you might, and you look back and you say, wow, that feels good. So there's some dopamine. We feel good when we get things done, all right? Serotonin, all right? That's that sense of pride. Maybe some of you here have graduated, you walk across the stage, someone shakes you by the hand and say, hey, well done, all right? That's a bit of an injection of serotonin. And then oxytocin, the cuddle hormone, all right? You know, when you see a young mother cuddling an infant or a young child, we get that warm fuzziness. Or we put some offering in the church plate, you know, in the offering plate, some money in the offering plate, you know, or we donate. We're helping others. We feel really good. Or we see someone else helping someone else. We feel that sense of oxytocin. And then, of course, we've got adrenaline. Right? When we get a fright, it's our fight-flight response. Now, a lot of adrenaline caused, you know, which is triggered when we get worried, you know, where we're worried or become anxious, long term, that's not good for us. It's not good for health, all right? But there are mechanisms that are evolved to help keep us safe. And that's why I think sometimes when we come to our investments, we hear some bad news on the news. We don't hear much good news on the news, right? We hear some bad news, and we get a little bit of a kick sometimes of maybe adrenaline or even cortisol. So a suggestion is don't listen to the news too much. Anyway, we're still wired for danger, but we haven't got any saber-toothed tigers to run away from at the moment. That's just part of our genetics. It's part of what makes us up. So, nice little quote. Sometimes bad times, tough times, they're actually good for us. Good things can come from tough times. We have challenges, but we're well positioned and equipped to solve them and make the world an even better place. Now, with some real pleasure now, because I'm very much looking forward to hearing from Pete, because I hope he's going to be able to improve my cricket game. But Pete leads the high performance area of New Zealand cricket. He's also been involved with Olympic teams. All right? Could I suggest it's not by accident that New Zealand, the Black Caps, are everyone else's second team. So if India is playing against the Black Caps, Indians will support India, of course, but every other team will support the Black Caps. It's quite unique. If England is playing the Black Caps, everyone except the Englishmen, or even some Englishmen, will still pick the Black Caps. So they are a very successful team, but it's not just about them winning, it's about how they win. And Pete is responsible for a lot of that. Right? So I wonder if you could give a great welcome